All right, welcome to the Ravat Show. See who I have with me, Sol, my very good friend and such a great thought leader in the space, in the data and analytics space, and doing a lot in AI as well. Sol, not like the world doesn't know you, but I'm pretty sure with all the talks that you've been giving all around the world, and here we are in Riyadh doing this, the Leap and Deep Fest conference. You also have a lot of talks here that I see.
Yes.
But definitely, I'm pretty sure the world knows you, but they would also want to learn more about yourself, about what you do. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate that. It is wonderful to be here in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, for the second year in a row.
Yeah.
Leap is pretty amazing. It's massive, it's overwhelming, but it's a pretty amazing conference. Um, I doubt folks know me, but I will give a background in case folks don't. Uh, I have been in the data space since the early 2000s, like most of the practitioners, if you will. I accidentally fell into it. I thought I was going to play professional sports my entire life.
Oh, wow.
And then, the older you get injured, recovery times just take a lot longer. And I was like, okay, do I want to continue staying a professional athlete or do I want to pivot over into being a professional? And I decided to be a professional, and I took the one job no one wanted, and
Yeah.
that was to be a data engineer. But I was a horrible data engineer. And so I really loved being with the practitioners and getting into the weeds of things, but I realized that I was better at translating what my fellow peers and practitioners were doing
Right.
to the business world.
Hmm.
And I loved playing that world in between. So I grew up in the business. I've always reported into the business, but I've always had my tenants in data and analytics and early applications of AI. Um, I was an SAP Platinum MDM lead, believe
Wow.
it or not, for
Yeah.
IBM. I did their, SAP Global ERP deployments, and after about 8, I decided, okay, I've had enough. And interestingly enough, in 2011, Watson beat Ken Jennings in Jeopardy at IBM.
Yeah.
And then I said I wanted in. And my boss knew me, of course. My boss's boss knew me, of course. And my boss's boss's boss knew me, of course, because I
Exactly.
was considered like the data girl at IBM for all these MDM deployments. And Jay went over to Watson. I said, I want in. And I followed. So I've been in the AI space since 2011. And in some of the roles I've had, we are heavily leaning into it, some of it not so much.
Hmm.
But things just kind of Christmas treed its way up since then. I was the Chief Data and AI Officer for Royal Caribbean back in 2016, the Chief Executive Vice President, Chief Data Officer for Sony Music, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Merck, and then
Exactly.
as of recent, the former Chief Analytics Officer for Estee Lauder. But I'm a recovering C-suite executive. I retired 7 months ago, and now I get to do the things that I love. So fast forward, this is why I'm here.
Wow, I love it. And we've seen you all over the place in the last, say, 1 year, and that's because you kind of get a lot of space to play around as well after
Yes.
retiring. But and which is a good news for at least the community because they get to learn the best insights in the data and analytics and the AI world from you, and the experience that you bring on the table is the best, like at least from the newsletter that you have in the conferences, the keynotes that you give are fantastic, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the Ravit show as well. Just selfishly, I wanted my community to learn more about what you're doing and how you're kind of making the data and AI space more powerful with all the things that you do. That brings me to another question, which is around, obviously you've solved so many problems in the last, say, 20 years, 20, 25 years of your career in the enterprise world, in the now in the startup world as well, that you're kind of solving a lot of problems that I know about. How do you think that things have evolved? The challenges have evolved, to be honest. Back then, say 10 years back or 20 years back, but you still think that, okay, these are still the challenges, but it has evolved, it has just gone to the next level.
Every role I've had, the scope has always been different. The challenges have always been different. Actually, the capabilities we needed to build have always been different.
Right.
But to quote my father, same sand, different shovel. Um, Fundamentally, there's always a knowledge gap and a knowledge divide between how data and analytics should be done and
Yep.
how it has been done.
Right.
And usually, the businesses or enterprises or companies don't realize the divide until all of a sudden they're like, well, why can't we get this? Why can't we do that?
Yeah.
Why can't we move faster? And fundamentally, it's because they haven't invested in the fundamentals, historically speaking. And so now all of a sudden, everyone uses terms like, let's monetize on data. Data is a new oil. Data's a corporate asset. It's now a strategic priority. Let's bring a CDO. Let's bring a CAIO.
Right.
So at a minimum, at least there's attention, at least there's gravitas. I think there's some fatigue just because there's so much stuff on the back end that has to be done. And so I think what I'm trying to do is bring awareness of it's not a silver bullet. You don't wave a wand, it doesn't go away. Data engineering, data modeling, data architecture, these things really, really matter. You need to have the right people on the right projects at the right time versus slapping a generalist and hope something comes out correctly.
Right.
And so what I'm really trying to do is bridge the gap between the two worlds at this point in time and then solve just the fundamental problems. I think the other thing is these transformations are not easy.
Easy, exactly.
And so hiring a team or putting in place a team or growing a team or keeping the team motivated and keeping morale high when they're constantly having to deal with different business models fluctuating and operating and knowing that all the back-end infrastructure that they've built or putting in place may change in a year or two and to not get discouraged. But that's just the reality of where we live and what we do. We are moving at a very rapid pace. So for me, I have a very soft spot for the practitioner world.
Exactly.
I'm very empathetic because I was one, but I was just sucky at it. And I have a soft spot for the folks who own the P&L because they have to drive the business and
Exactly.
they're measured based on their success. But how do we create that harmonious Venn diagram, that circle in the middle between the two worlds to get stuff done, but also deal with the constant shifts and pivots? And so that's always been my interest, and to give the practitioners a voice to the C-suite executives and to educate the C-suite executives on what's really going on and helping them get what they need.
Yeah, I love it. And this is something, you kind of bring the fine balance for at least the enterprises and startups out there where you kind of make sure where, you have the business understanding because you've spent, the last few years into the game, but you've also been a practitioner out there doing a lot of things, even if you say you were sucky at it. But
I was sucky. I was a mediocre practitioner. Like, you don't want me touching SQL scripts and Python scripts anymore. It's bad. It's bad.
But I think that's that kind of brings a good fine balance for at least the people that you work with in the things you do for the startups and enterprise. Talking of that, obviously I know you work with a lot of companies in the startup space, in the enterprise world still. Do you want to share what do you do right now, and what are the big challenges that you're seeing? But not only just that, also in general about other things that you're excited about in the space.
So it's interesting. I think for the first time in my life, I am not coming in with a script or a plan, or I need to do this and I need to hit this next level.
Exactly.
I'm enjoying it, and like the universe is bringing things to me. But there's been a few things and a few themes still helping enterprises, whether it's my fellow CDOs or CAOs that are first time taking the job or second time taking the job. I've held it 4 times, and I was one of the first in 2016.
Right.
And all scopes are different. So I always say, you've got to balance your offensive playbook with your defensive playbook. Your defensive playbook is all around the back-end infrastructure, the architecture, the modeling, the engineering, the
Right.
pipelines, the integrations, the InfoSec, the DevOps, the stuff that the business doesn't care about, but it's fundamental to everything. And then your offensive playbook, which is the front-end capabilities like digital campaigns, CRM systems, insights, data science as a
Exactly.
service. And so how do you build that balance? So I'm helping CDOs and CAOs who are taking the post for the first time, how to structure their vision, mission, and strategy, and then how to right-size the team accordingly. And then, of course, a lot of organizations need help with their AI strategy and use case development. I've been doing it since 2011. I
Yeah.
have failed and I have succeeded. I don't believe in selecting use cases based on business value alone, because I think you can find business value in everything.
True.
But you have to take into consideration your risk tolerance, risk exposure, and then your ability to deploy on that use case based on existing maturities and where you're going to be the next year. So how to thoughtfully think through that so that you don't get stuck building a POC but can't scale into production because you just don't have the back-end infrastructure. So that's a reality check for some companies.
Exactly.
So I'm helping enterprises with that. I do have a book coming out, which is great, in April.
Exactly.
It's like a how-to, just based on everything I've done. So it's a lot of fun. It's data and AI, but when you grow up as a practitioner, no one teaches you what strategy means. So if you're a practitioner who's now an entrepreneur, who's now an executive, or you're in middle management and you're expected to develop a vision, a mission, a strategy, like high-level words that we hear about,
Yeah.
what the heck does it actually mean?
Exactly.
I wasn't taught. And so the book will actually teach you, how do you develop a strategy? What are the components in it? How do you develop a use case? What's the framework to use? How do you do a design process, change management, but all focused on AI and data management. So it's very much a how-to book. And then the fourth and fifth advising companies, which is a
Yes.
lot of fun.
Yeah.
Product market fit, taking a look at their products and understanding, okay, who are you selling to? What's the persona? What are you trying to do? Which problem are you solving? And making sure they've thoroughly flushed it out. And I love advising the companies because it gets me close to the tech and the practitioners,
Exactly.
which is where I love. And then the last is there are a lot of startups and scale ups that have done really, really well because of their investor network, or they've got a few good logos. But they're now at this point where they can't scale. And part
True.
of it is because they may be introduced to a lot of great companies, but they don't have an enterprise playbook. They don't know how to take what they've created and
Right.
convert it into a language that these bigger companies understand and the problems that they're facing. So I'm helping them connect the dots between the two.
Wow,
So
I
it's a
love
lot of
it.
fun.
So many things that you'd already into, Sol, which
Yeah, it's been less than a year and it's been fun.
yeah,
But yeah, those are the
exactly.
themes.
And book is something pretty exciting for me, at least, because I read a lot of books and a lot of thought leader books because it kind of gets you to understand about the space much more in depth. And this how to book, I feel, will definitely be a game changer for at least those, like you said, in the mid level of their career and wanting to get to the next level, but do not understand like the buzzwords that they kind of feel about is like, oh, what is the strategic value, or what is, the business value that
Yes,
we want to
yes.
bring in. So I can't wait for the book. It's happening in April, so we'll definitely keep our community
Yes,
posted about
please,
it as
thank you.
well. And I'll definitely get a signed copy of my own.
Yeah.
I'll try to get at least.
100%. And that was like interesting because I'm very much a doer. I'm
Yeah.
not a talker or a theorist. Like I don't do theory. I don't do theoretical stuff. I don't regurgitate, and then pontificate as if I'm an expert in it.
Right.
I just feel very much comfortable in the details. So I'm very much a doer. I'm very biased towards action. So writing a book that sort of aggregates and culminizes of like, there's even a chapter on how to work with people, which sounds dumb, but when you're in middle management, you're expected to work with multiple teams, multiple
Exactly.
personalities, multiple individuals. And no one taught me how to do that. And I would get frustrated because you meet the curmudgeons who are always negative. You meet the people who are always positive but don't contribute anything to a
Oh my god,
meeting.
yeah.
You meet like, and I call it the 10 AI archetypes, like different types of people that you are forced to work with. But which meetings do you actually bring them in? How do you interact with them? How do you work with them so that your people aren't your project killers? Because they can make or break any engagement. And it's not
Exactly.
specific to AI, it could be anything. Like even just organizational behavior one on one, those are things you're not taught as a practitioner. And so it's not until you face plant and you make a mistake, you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that because of this.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
basic stuff.
I can't even think of, of having heard of a chapter like this, which is because you kind of start thinking when you talk about working with people, it's going to be like straightforward, right? But you never know
Yeah,
the challenges
it's
that come your
no.
way when you're actually, meeting multiple stakeholders and you're kind of dealing with multiple departments, I would say.
Yeah, and like, or you're just dealing with jerks. And you're like, why are you being a jerk? We're here to do something. This should be fun. This is exciting. We're doing something new.
Right.
And then you just realize, some people are just there for there because they check in at 9, check
Yeah.
out at 5.
Oh my
Some
God.
people are hungry and ambitious and motivated.
True.
Some people have no idea what's going
Know
on
what's
and they
going on.
just kind of follow whatever. Um, but no one teaches you to work with the different personalities until you're faced with it. But I think that's the hard part of, if you're an individual contributor, your bubble is small, so you're not really exposed to things. And then if you become an entrepreneur or CEO, you kind of have a SHIT moment because the game changes. But if you're one that ends up going into middle management and have aspirations of going higher, the EQ, the SQ, the BQ has to complement the IQ. Otherwise, you won't get far in life.
Wow.
And no one
Yeah.
teaches you that stuff. So, I'm hoping to bridge that
Bridge
divide
that gap.
between the
Yeah.
two worlds. Yeah.
I love it. And definitely that also brings me to another interesting question. And before I forget that, I know you talk a lot around data and AI products. And I definitely want to know a little about that as well. What are you working on currently,
Yeah.
if you can share with our audience?
Advising is great, consulting is great, but
Right.
problem solving is what gets me excited. So I'm a part of a few companies where we're trying to solve certain problems. One of them is Armada.ai, and it's really around solving data and AI application use cases on
Right.
edge. So you've got these major industries like energy, telco,
Exactly.
transportation, oil and gas, mining, where most of their operations are on edge, meaning they're not in centralized cosmopolitan cities where bandwidth and network is a commodity. they fundamentally have connection issues. But a lot of the equipment, a lot of the processing needs to happen on edge. So instead of centralizing all the information in the middle, which drives workloads and cloud costs high,
Yeah.
how do we process information on the edge? So we're rebuilding a distributed data framework, if you will. And then how do you connect via some of the satellite systems like Starlink so that you could bifurcate essential from non-essential data and only push through essential data into the centralized work zone, bringing workloads lower. And that's
Wow.
how you can drive AI applications. So like, that's what we're trying to solve with Armada. There's another company that I'm working with called Protopia. So right now, enterprises are having hesitance in converting from POC to production,
Right.
because there's just a lot of security concerns, data leakage being one of them. So
Exactly.
one of the solutions that we're working on is how do you take information that you're feeding into the LLMs and mask it, so in the rare case that leakage does occur, your information doesn't come out. It's all been encrypted and masked. Now I'm using the word encryption. It's a different technology than encryption,
Yeah.
because you can de-encrypt in encryption, but in this case you can't. So if leakage occurs, the letters and phrases and zeros and whatnot stay completely jumbled and garbled. So we call it a stained glass technology. So we want more AI applications to pivot from POC to production, and we want data
Yeah.
leakage to no longer be a concern. So how do we solve that problem? And then another company called Stitch Insights that I'm helping.
Yes.
There's a lot of marketers out there that still use market research and surveys to understand how the consumers behave.
Exactly.
But when you're doing a new product launch, there's a difference between what consumers say they choose or will choose versus how they actually act.
Act.
So how do you use linguistic advanced analytics and behavioral modeling to determine the difference between what they say they're going to do
Wow.
versus what they're actually doing? So like different solutions for different problems. So it's
Yeah.
keeping me, it's keeping it fun.
Oh wow, I love it. Yeah, Protopia was one of the companies I've spoken to Eman as well.
Yeah, Iman's great.
He's amazing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
what they're doing is
And now they've got a
fantastic.
team, Balaji and Mark,
Yeah,
and
Balaji
like
and
it's a
Mark.
whole thing. Yeah, I'll be with them at South by Southwest next
Oh
week.
wow,
Yeah,
amazing.
It'll be cool.
So definitely very interesting work that you're doing in the startup space in
Yeah.
a lot of in the data and AI products as well, like specifically AI. So very interesting. That also brings me to another interesting question, because you've worked with, you know, you work with both the sides of the space, like the enterprise and the startup. What's like your vision there in terms of how do you see enterprise versus startup? What's like the scenario there?
I love them both.
Yeah.
Very different problems and very different types of people you're working with.
Right.
Enterprises are very much, measure 3 times, cut once. Slower, deliberate, thoughtful, painstakingly slower, deliberate, and
Yeah.
thoughtful, but for the right reasons, right? The risk exposure is just too much.
Yeah.
So there requires an element of thought of how do we strategically position the company in a way that positions it positively, but isn't a detriment
Yeah.
to the P&L that's running. So
Exactly.
business continuity while you're innovating, which is hard because the structure is counterintuitive, because if you're a public company, you're evaluated based on cash, earnings per share,
Exactly.
market value. But if you're innovating, a lot of that stuff is trial and error and new. So
True.
the two conflict. So how do you innovate and grow, but maintain your stance? So the thought leadership and the way you have to think is very, very differently. But with startups, it's here's a problem, let's go attack it. And you're fast and you're furious. And there's just so many smart people.
Right.
And I feel dumb, and I'm like, that's why I love working with the startup world. Like, I'm just surrounded by geniuses, things that I could never do.
Yeah.
But I can translate what they can do into the real world application. And so, like right now, I'm kind of enjoying working with both sides of the fence.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. And definitely it brings a lot of opportunities for the startups out there, because you're kind of going out there and helping them and understand the language of how enterprises work, because that's like the biggest gap when I talk to startups as well, that they feel that, oh, we reach a level where the POC is done, but then
Now what?
now what?
Yeah.
It's been almost 7 months. We are
Yeah.
in the same stage. How do we get to the next level? Do you have anything that you would want to share? I know there are a lot of ways to get to the next level, but do you want to share anything in terms of how do you help them to get to the next level as well?
I think there's 3 things. One, a lot of people invest in the product before they invest in sales and marketing. They feel the product has to be done before they go market it.
True.
And you have to fly the plane while you're building it at the same time.
Very true.
So I hate to say it, but you may be marketing and selling something that doesn't exist yet, but that's okay. You are forward selling something that's going to inevitably catch up. And don't be afraid of that.
Love it.
Because even if it takes you a year to get your first logo, you don't want to do it a year after you built your product. You want to start when you start building your product. It doesn't mean your marketing doesn't change, your positioning doesn't change. The theme of your product may change, and that's okay. But I would say start sales and marketing as soon as you start product development.
Yes.
I think the second is if you're self-funding, that's fine. But when you're ready to get funding so that you could scale, your investors matter a lot. The startups that I've seen really get in front of some great companies have all been introduced by their investors, because they've invested in you. They fundamentally want you to be successful.
Exactly.
They now have vested interest to make sure that you take off. So they're going to put you in front of individuals. So make sure that, as you're going through rounds of funding, they don't have to be a tier 1, tier 2, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with their network and their connections. And are they willing to put you in front of their network and connections? I would say that's the second one.
Yes.
The third is find someone immediately that can help sell. I have met a lot of founders and entrepreneurs and CEO who are brilliant engineers,
Right.
who are brilliant architects, but cannot sell.
Sell. Yeah.
And so there has to be an element of storytelling, there has to be an element of narrative, there has to be a way to create the picture of what problem you're solving. And I hate to say it, but sometimes the founders and these phenomenal practitioners are too deep in the weeds, and they talk a language that most people don't understand. So if you can find a techno-functional individual who's part practitioner but also part go-to-market and sales, or at least can do the storytelling between the two,
Right.
have them have the discussions with anyone that you're put in front of.
Yeah.
To complement the founders, if not lead. The founder should be supplemental. I would say those are the three things.
I love it. So you mentioned about marketing and sales engine should be running as you go into it.
Yes.
Investor relationships matter a lot.
Their network matters, yes.
Get the sales champion and make sure that they have the right storytelling to, get the right picture for your product.
Those would be the three things.
I love it. I love it.
Yes.
This is great. Sol, anything else that you would want to? I know you're back to back as well, so I don't want to take a lot of time. But do you want to share anything else with our audience? Obviously, your book is coming up in April, so we are
Yes.
definitely looking forward to that. I'll be sharing a review. I'll write a review about the book as well. I can't wait to get into it. And I know you're doing a course, so feel free to let us know when it's coming out. But do you want to
Yeah.
share a little about the course?
Yeah, sure. So the book is already on Amazon, ready to go. Pre-sales are there.
Oh, nice.
It officially gets released April 30th, so end of April. I'd love any support if you guys want to. I am partnering potentially with someone to launch a course.
Nice.
And it's really around the graduation and the development from practitioner to executive.
Wow.
There are just certain things from a business sense, from an organizational sense, from a technical sense. Of not only are you scaling yourself so that you could oscillate into or evolve into a different social group, but also the things that you're building fundamentally around architecture and modeling and topology. How do you scale the IC work that you've done into something that's scalable within an enterprise? So it's really ultimately a transition to scalability and operability that I think most of us don't get the training unless we're put into a position, and then we have to figure it out on our own.
Right.
That's what happened to me several times over. Like, just kind of thrown into the fire, and you sink or you swim.
Exactly.
Even if you're swimming, you make mistakes. So how do we help our beloved practitioners who deserve an opportunity to be prepared?
Love it. This is great, Saul. Once again, you're doing an amazing job for the community, and we are happy that you've started independently and started doing so many things for the community. That helps us with obviously a book, course. Startup world is very happy. I'm pretty sure they are just like, oh, can we have Saul do something for us in terms of at least making our teams understand that how do we take the next level, or what should be the basic understanding of even selling a product, or how do you want to make sure that your product is like in the right market fit.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot, and I can't wait to definitely learn more about the course, the book. It's already on Amazon. So thanks a lot once again for chatting with us on the Rabbit Show. I'm pretty sure we'll be meeting each other at
Of
many more
course, of
places.
course.
We always cross paths.
We
Like,
always cross paths. I'm glad we finally got the time to do this.
yes,
Yes.
exactly. Thanks again for doing
I'm
this. It's
humbled.
such a
Thank you
pleasure.
so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.
Sol. Thank you, everyone, for watching us.